at it or doing something big. But once I got involved and I was getting a positive reaction, yeah, it kind of shot through the roof.
And these clubs, my understanding is that it's, you're prohibited to actually sleep with the people who come and attend the clubs. Was that the case in the clubs you were at?
No, I mean, nothing's going to go on in the club, but when I started out, everything was freelance. So it was just like a party. The business that I run now and stuff, we encourage obviously no sexual or physical reaction in the club, or even if you're sent out to do a party. But there's still the ambiance of once the show's over, if there's a genuine connection and she likes you and you like her, then obviously you guys can meet. And if it goes somewhere else, then that's just an adult choice, right? That's preference. But no sexual activity directly connected to being hired or performing at an event. It's just more a guy meets girl type of scenario.
So you said it was a while, before you got into a relationship because your heart was so broken, and you described the shock of her going into stripping and then saying, she was meeting a bunch of men. So as you were stripping yourself, did you try and meet women, date women, and form relationships? And did they have the same shocked reaction back at you, thinking, how can I date a male stripper?
Yeah, it was challenging, man. I really think to this day, because I've never married and I don't have any kids, and I know for a fact that it was a byproduct of me choosing this as a profession. I met amazing women along the way, but I guess the pressure and the insecurity that comes with me going out every single week in a room full of women, and I'll be honest with you, in my youth, you feel entitled, right? You feel entitled. I'm meeting all these women. I had this dysfunctional thought process of I deserve to have my cake and eat it too. So I need to almost meet a woman that understands that I'm going to do me because I'm entitled to it, because I'm this celebrity, this inner city celebrity. And I had a terrible mindset in terms of connecting in relationships and finding a partner. So I squandered a lot of great opportunities with some amazing women.
So by the time you hit 30, where was your life at?
So 30, my life, I was doing very well. Like with the dancing, I'm business minded or whatever. So I saved money, I bought property, and I was kind of setting myself up for like a great future. And then I went through like a tough period of time. In my early 30s, my mom passed away. She passed away young at 47 years old. She had kidney complications. And me growing up in a macho male mind state, I didn't know how to deal with grief. And I want to say my mom, and literally 1 year later, my grandmother passed away from cancer. So these were my parental figures. And instead of mourning and dealing with it from a sensible place of just healing, I bottled it all up, and I just went on this quest of material, right? Making money and doing things financially make you feel better. And in that place of despair, I made a bunch of reckless investments and stuff like that, and kind of threw away all of the things that I built, just not dealing with grief and dealing with depression and stuff like that the right way. So it completely knocked me off my course.
My heart goes out to you, man. I can't imagine. So you said you were in your early 30s when your mum passed away. How did you hear that? And was it completely unexpected?
Actually, it wasn't unexpected, but I was in denial, right? My mom had been dealing with these issues since I was very young, maybe 10, 11 years old. So she went to dialysis 3 times a week. She was constantly in surgeries because with dialysis, they have to give you a port to perform the procedure. And over the years, it's connected to a major artery. That artery becomes ineffective. They have to move it to another artery. They have to move it to another place. And my mom ultimately just got to a place where she was running out of sites. She was running out of major arteries to perform the procedure. But I've seen her go have this surgery so many times, I kind of didn't see the magnitude of this is really a risk. So the very last time she went in, I had just a confident foregone conclusion, like, oh, it's just another surgery. She'll be fine. And when she didn't make it, it was like, wow, I wasn't mentally or emotionally prepared. You know, it's amazing how sometimes men, and I can only really speak for men, but if you don't have that place of connecting to your feelings, you shut down a deep way. The day my mom died happened to be 4th of July. And that morning I went to see her in the hospital. And later that day, I went to a pool party. I was so disconnected from my feelings and my emotions that I don't think I processed these losses. My mom, my grandmother, I had a terrible breakup during the time. And I don't think I processed any of that till years later. You know, I never really mourned, you know, so it just threw my life in shambles other places because I'm running from the heartache, you know?
Also, I think you were in shock and you went on autopilot because my best mate died about 3 years ago. And I found out when I was on the way to film some podcasts, and I went and filmed those podcasts as if nothing had happened. It's like my mind wouldn't accept that he was dead. It just wasn't real to me. And it wasn't until days later it all started to kick in, and the realization, and you just thinking about all the memories and things like that. So did you have a period of reflection as well?
Yeah, but it really took me years. It took me years. I just kept running from it. I think I kind of had like an avalanche of bad luck with my mom, then my grandmother, then my girlfriend, and I had a long, like a close best friend that somehow we were falling out. I didn't even know, and so I had a loss of my circle like all at once. And my way was just trying to run from it and create success, but create success recklessly, which then, you know, put everything else in shambles.
And a lot of people would self-medicate with substances and alcohol. Did you fall back on any of that? I mean, I've done a lot of that in my life.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I've never been an alcohol substance use guy. That got instilled with me very young, growing up in the crack era and seeing how drugs decimated my neighborhood. I definitely got the Nancy Reagan "just say no" message, and I did avoid that. But you know, like I said, my stuff was reckless spending, reckless things like that, and also, if I'm being honest, womanizing. Right, like as a man, you know, there's this badge you get of conquest of women. It's dysfunctional, but it's something that's instilled in us in a young age. So now I want to just date. I want to go out. I want to have a good time. I want these things to fulfill what's missing. And you know, luckily for me, when you fulfill yourselves with this pattern, this hamster wheel of a pattern, you wake up one day and say, no, this is not the way. This just makes you actually feel emptier.
Well said. Did you also find that throwing yourself into work kept your mind off your losses?
Yes, like staying busy is sometimes the best way to kind of block it out. You don't necessarily heal and you don't deal with it the right way, but in the moment, it feels gratifying because you don't have to deal with it.
Yeah. All right. So in your late 30s, then, what was your life like then?
So, like I said, I went through this pitfall with bad real estate investments and mortgage crisis and these things like that. And then I ended up with another stroke of luck. My phone rung one day and it was reality TV. So I got called for a reality show called Megan Wants a Millionaire. I had previously was selected to go on one of the I Love New York shows. It was like a big reality show here in the States. It didn't work out, but the producers remembered me. So they called me for this show. And I went on this show, filmed. It was great. It led to another show, which was called I Love Money. And at the time, this was the most popular show on VH1 in the States. So I was feeling fantastic. I was like, oh, man, this is going to be great. I'm going to be on TV. This is going to, you know, correct all the losses from the bad real estate investments and stuff. And it leading into, while my Megan Wants a Millionaire show was airing, one of the contestants actually did this heinous crime and he killed his wife. He had met a woman in Vegas at one of those weekend weddings, and the relationship was toxic and got out of hand, and he strangled her. It was like a terrible crime, so he wouldn't get caught. He pulled all the teeth out, cut all the fingers off, put her in a suitcase, and put her in a dumpster. And what he didn't realize was apparently she had breast implants and there's serial numbers on them. So they were able to identify the body. They chased him. It was this massive manhunt, and he ended up hanging himself. So now this is happening while we're on a comedic show that's airing. So of course the network pulled the show. The production company got a black eye of everything. So now the second show I'm on is airing, but it's never getting. But they're showing it 2:00 in the morning. And so this inventing of myself that I was expecting to get crashed and burned. And now I'm just completely depressed. completely depressed.
And I imagine now we're getting close to the time you get the call. Is it from Cassie?
Yeah, we're leading to that.
What led up to that then?
So again, coming out of the scenario, I'm in my late 30s, early 40s. And now I have to rebuild myself at 40 years old as a male dancer. So a way of rebuilding myself was, we're in an internet age now. Look, I can't really be dancing myself. So let me throw events. So I built the website, getpunished.com. I decided to market events, but you could also hire people for dancers. And doing that, I created web presence. So if you Googled male stripper bachelorette party, my website would come up. And apparently in the search, I guess, with Cassie and Mr. Combs, they Googled male dancer and my website came up and they ended up calling me directly.
Can you remember what was said on that call?
I do, kind of, because it was very typical. There were no cues from the call that I was going to see a celebrity couple or anything like that. It was just Cassie at the time. I didn't know who it was, but she just said, "Hey, it's my birthday. My husband said I can have an entertainer. I'm here with some friends. Could you do a party for us?" And I said, "Hey, no problem." The going rate at that time was $200. I was this close to giving it away because I was actually doing an event at the time. But when I was taking the information, they said Trump Tower. So if you're in the New York City area and it's a Trump hotel party, that's an expensive hotel. You assume you're going to make a lot of tips. So I kept the party and I went there myself.
Could you describe what it was like arriving?
Surreal, man, because I'm expecting a room full of ladies. And literally Cassie opens the door and she's stunning, right? She's stunning. Like in person, you see people on TV and stuff and there's makeup and filters and, stuff like that. But she in person is flawless. I've never seen like a woman in person that striking. And she's in a robe and it's apparent that she's naked underneath. So it's a really like, what the hell like is going on? And, very nice, very cordial, big smile, inviting, "Hey, come on in." And I walk in and it's no party, no nothing, just a dimly lit room. There's sheets all over the furniture. And, she immediately just tells me, "Hey, look, I don't want you to dance." She hands me a stack of money and says, "I want to create a sexy scene for me and my husband. Are you comfortable with that? We're going to sit on these couches and put oil on each other and do something sexy." And I had never been in a scenario like that, but it was extremely like wow and tempting, based on all the attributes that was happening.
So you agreed to that then, and then are you brought through into the room where Diddy's is he in the corner?
He's not there at this time.
Oh, he's not there. Okay.
Yeah. So I was instructed to go in the bathroom and change to either underwear or a towel. And she showed me like it was like a couch set up, like a long couch set adjacent to like a single chair. So I was supposed to sit on the single chair and she would be on the couch across from me and we would create the scene. And she said at some point her husband, because at this time I didn't know who they were, at this point her husband would come in and to not acknowledge him, not to look at him, not to talk to him. We're supposed to act like he's not there and just create this warrior type of scenario.
So are you intrigued but a bit apprehensive hearing all this because you've not done it before?
Actually, I have anxiety. I'm scared to death. What I didn't get into earlier was some of the pressure of being this male dancer with the tennis match slong, right? It created sexual pressure, right? So this sexual pressure to perform and this expectation and stuff at a very early age, I started to be dependent on Cialis and these pills. And there was nothing wrong with me physically. I just had this mental worry about being able to perform and stuff like that. So by the time we get to this party, I understand that it's sexually suggestive, and it could be a scenario where it goes somewhere sexy to a physical attribute, but I'm worried, right? Because the discomfort of knowing there's going to be a husband in the room and his reaction or whatever, I could not get in the moment. So I was dealing with anxiety, thinking, hey, will I be able to get an erection? Will I be able to perform? Will this be something that I could succeed in? So I could not get into it. It was a severe place of worry, but I'm going to try to make it work because I got handed a lot of money. So it was very challenging to be in that situation.
So are you saying that you'd been taking these pills and they weren't working anymore, or you didn't take the pills on that occasion?
Well, no. So the pills had been working, but I didn't realize this plays into what my book is about, because my book is about my developing erectile dysfunction over a long period of time, psychologically, through different factors that a lot of men go through. If you have any degree of anxiety, it releases a hormone called cortisol, and cortisol restricts your blood vessels. So what ED meds do is they open your blood vessels. And so, but if you have anxiety, the cortisol closes them. I didn't realize this at this time. So I popped the pill the very first time, hoping it'll work, but the discomfort of the husband, Mr. Combs, being there created the anxiety. So the very first time I could not perform, which was fine, because the very first time it wasn't mandatory. It was create the sexy scene. I got an option of sex that I declined, right? Hey, look, I'm here for you guys. That's my cover up because I can't perform anyway, but I'm just here for you guys, and don't worry about it. Leave me out of it. But in terms of being called back, there was a clear expectation of sex, and there was always a challenge scenario for me where sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't, if I can just stay in the moment.
So was in the early occasions then, was Diddy always disguised in the same fashion, and what was that?
Yeah, his disguise was I don't know exactly what they call it. I hear burqa, I hear hijab, but it's similar to what the Muslim women wear, where their faces are completely covered and you can only see their eyes, which was a very odd scenario because he would have that on but be completely nude. So seeing somebody completely nude with that veil on is it's not something you see every day, And
you're a man who's seen many things. So for you to say that, you must be thinking, wow, this is like really out there.
Yeah. It was definitely a odd, weird factor for me and my experience. But again, I don't know who they actually are at this time. For whatever reason, I didn't recognize Cassie. And again, his face is completely covered. And most of the time he was across the room. And I can't look at him directly anyway, right? So I just knew, hey, look, I'm charging $200 a pop. After that first occasion, I was handed $800, then an additional $1,200. So I basically made $2,000 for a baby oil massage. So it's like, hey, listen, man, and this woman's stunning, and I got to try to keep this going because to me, it was a lucrative scenario in terms of making money easily.
So despite your mental anxiety on the first occasion, then, did you manage to get control of that for the as you progressed? Yes,
I did. And it would be based on momentum. So this scenario went across 2.5 years. So I could get calls multiple months in between. So it could be 4 months in between seeing them and doing this type of scenario. But when I would get seen, it could be like a Friday night, a Saturday night, a Sunday night, like back to back to back. So I noticed the frequency of the back-to-back. I can create some calmness, but sometimes going 6 months in between and just popping back up, it would start like everything would start over. So it was just really hit or miss. Like I even would say at sometimes like, Dag, I wonder if they're gonna keep hiring me, because one day I'm good, one day not so much, but obviously in terms of creating what was wanted, it did last 2.5 years. So there had to be some positive thoughts about whatever interaction I created.
So after the initial occasion with the baby oil massage, did it then become a regular scenario that was just repeated each time, or did the scenarios vary?
They did not. It was very routine and methodical. It always started the same, with some sort of she's on one couch, I'm on another couch. We put baby oil on each other individually. We rub it on each other. It starts as a distant mutual masturbation, which then could become some type of touching and caressing, then leading into sexual acts of intercourse and oral sex.
And was the dialogue during this, or was it all done with music playing or silence? Or
yeah, so it felt like acting in terms of with me and Cassie, like we were really trying to create sexual energy. So I'm following that lead, and most of the dialogue were subtle directions. I said this in my testimony from Mr. Combs, where he would say, the rooms were like candlelit, or he's across the room and he may say, hey, move the candle to the side. Hey, why don't turn him this way? You move forward. She moves back. Like it's like a director, a director setting the scene and the visual that he wanted. Nothing aggressive, nothing that seemed threatening or whatever, but it was clear this view or this look of the situation was going to be based on his personal preference.
So was he disguising his voice when he was giving you these directions?
He was not. But, fun fact about me is I've been in clubs for the last 30 years. So my hearing's not great at all. So I did not make out what the voice, I didn't recognize it to a degree where I can say this is who it was. And naively, my initial meet up with them was, I was introduced to a married couple, right? So I believed they were married. So of course, like anybody else, after the first couple of times, I'm on Google, like, who's this married couple? And obviously Mr. Combs was not married. They were not married. So I'm going to draw a blank of him even being a possibility, because I think I'm looking for a married person.
Yeah, it makes sense. A few people are asking about whether there was music playing.
Yes, at times. At times they would put music in the background. All the same routine sexual ambiances that we've all created, with the mood, some music playing, some dim lights, some candles. That was definitely the vibe, added with a lot of baby oil.
Do you remember the preferred music they chose?
It was pretty much just slow, sexy R&B. Kind of like, stuff like The Weeknd and Maxwell and, these type of R&B mood setting music, So it was typical setup. Typical setup. Yeah, I remember being younger, like having a girl come over. I got to put on my favorite track, got my little good time playlist,
My partner Jen has just asked whether Diddy played any of his own music while you were in these scenarios.
He did not. I did not hear any Diddy music at all.
So once you were getting physical with Cassie, then how long did these scenarios last? How long were you present before you left?
Well, I was always there multiple hours aside from the first time, but the sex itself seemed anywhere between 25 and 45 minutes. They weren't extremely long sessions. The problem is I could show up at 2 a.m. and literally they would not be ready to interact to 6 a.m. So I'm literally just waiting around till I get a cue. So I was typically there 4 or 5 hours every single time, but the actual sex acts were only 20 to 45 minutes.
So Diddy sat there with his burqa. You're not supposed to be looking at him, and he's giving you directions, you know, while you guys are getting physical. And could you tell that he was physically enjoying himself from this?
Well, you know, as I testified to, the majority of time he's masturbating, right? He's masturbating, he's pacing back and forth, so he's pleasuring himself while watching. So that's my only cue to him enjoying himself, right? Whatever the sexual scene and stuff we're creating, he's giving directions, saying what he wants to see. There was times that I testified to where we're in the middle of an act, and this was one of the rare occasions where we moved from the living room into a bedroom, and he actually took a stack of $100 bills and he slammed it on the bed. And, you know, we both kind of reacted startled, and she turned to him and asked him, was everything okay? And he was like, hey, look, I'm enjoying this, you know? So I did get cues of him enjoying it through his self-pleasuring and him directly saying it at times. So that's what I would share in terms of that.
So I shouldn't be asking this, but a few people have put it in the chat. It was brought up at the court about his well-hungness or not.
So again, I'm not supposed to look directly at him. I'm definitely was not focused in that area. The only thing I will say, which was kind of the odd scenario to me, I already said I cannot hear well, and I could hear the masturbation from across the room, like it was it's like a flat, like I could hear it, you know. So it was very odd that you could hear like sounds of whatever stroke or movement he can do it, but there was a sound to it. And I thought that was, if you think about, if you're going to ask the question of somebody being well endowed, which again, I don't know, right? But you would assume this, I know when I use that pump thing to get the hot sausage over the Frankfurter, I know the extra skin and girth or whatever could create sound, right? So
wow.
That's the only way I can answer that. I did not look. I did not want to look. You know, I was already having a problem with my own erection, so staring at another guy's beef was probably would not have been a good thing for me. So I can't confirm anything, but that's the most I can say to answer that question. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, you're very helpful and very honest, and we appreciate that. I'm trying to, one side of my mind is not trying to think about this, and the other side of my mind is like, you got to ask a question, you got to think about this. But to be creating that much thunder, he must have been really banging his bishop from that distance. So, all right, so you've got a question here then. While using the baby oil, did you ever feel different? Like maybe it had other mind-altering ingredients in it?
I did not. You know, I felt like I was in my stable mind the entire time. I'm not a drinker. I don't smoke or use any drugs or anything like that. So I was pretty much squared. The only thing I would say, and I don't want to imply anything, right, at all, but I usually have a pretty good memory, right? And I do realize that the majority of my encounters, I can't remember a lot of the details. Like I can't, like, you know, I don't want this to spin into any accusation thing. Somebody asking me the question, it just made me think a little bit more to it. But I know I don't have a lot of recollection, but my honest feel is that I was fine. There was nothing to influence me in it. And if there was something in the baby oil, I'm a stripper. I've been using baby oil all my life. So I don't think there was anything impactful. But that's a good, interesting question.
You had a lot of questions come in about Diddy's, whether he was, you think he was a voyeur, or whether you think that he wanted to join in with you. Questions along those lines. Any vibes? Did you detect any vibes?
So So ironically, when we first began, and I did not know who he was, it was purely a voyeur type of scenario, right? Halfway through, when I actually found out who he was, I did honestly get paranoid because growing up here in the States, there has always been rumors about Diddy's sexuality. Obviously, nobody can confirm it. I don't read into it too much because even myself as a male dancer, when I hit my height of popularity, rumors came out that, questioning my sexuality. So I know it's something that comes along. But because the rumors were out there, I was actually paranoid. I write about it in my book, the insert that they're publicizing that I testified to. I say that my actual experience was because I couldn't hear, he would give instructions, and his instructions may say something like, baby, I love that position you're in, right? But my paranoid mind with my hard hearing would hear him say, I can't wait to penetrate him. And I'd be like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? So I was having all of these crazy, deaf, paranoid interpretations. Wondering if, hey, is this guy, like I literally write it like, it's so bad because I wrote the story extremely comical in my book. And I'm like, oh man, this guy, I said no names. This guy's going to see this, but I'm like joking around, like, because like, and so I did. I went through a factor like every single time I came wondering like, oh man, like if his sexuality is in question, will he, make an advance at me? And if he makes an advance at me, oh shit, like how am I going to handle this? Like I was definitely paranoid and worried that it could go somewhere left. But luckily it didn't. It didn't. So this is no verifying any part of Diddy's sexuality. We had no interactions, no nothing. Not one thing seemed gay or off. But because of the rumors, I was paranoid that it could go left.
So several of the viewers have asked if you could just go back and let them know how you found out it was Diddy and what year was that?
So this started sometime in 2012, and I believe I did not find out to 2013. It was at least a year, 15 months into me having these interactions with them. And I found out by luck. Like I told you, I would wait around for hours. And in one specific hotel, they put me in an additional room. And while I'm waiting, I just decided to cut on the TV, and the hotel had a welcome message. And the welcome message was, the Essex House would like to welcome Mr. Sean Combs. And I was like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, no way. I felt like an idiot, right? Because I actually followed him on Instagram. I knew I'm a fan, right? And so, I didn't obviously diligently look at his page, but the minute I saw his name, I was able to go. I'm his silhouette, like his complexion, all of the things is adding up. And obviously now I see him in pictures with Cassie. So I'm like, dude, you're a dunce. A year later, you're just realizing who it is. But that's when the paranoid, that's when the paranoid kicked in. Because there was those questions of his sexuality.
So when you met them, after now realizing who they are, how did you not manage to give them a heads up that you knew? Did you have to like restrain? Was it like acting?
I played it cool, similar way, poker face. But I think very shortly after that, I think he kind of knew. I mean, I did leave the TV on. He might have went into the room, or somebody might have went in the room and saw, oh, wow, my name's on the TV. So eventually the next time he just did not have the veil on anymore, and he just had a baseball cap. So at some point I could actually see him peripheral. This entire time, I never had eye contact with him, which was odd. I was asked on the Piers Morgan interview, he pointed out that literally the first time I had eye contact with him was after I testified leaving the courtroom. So that was kind of like, whoa. But I just acted normal, back to your question, and kind of just went with the flow.
So when he switched from the burqa to the baseball cap, did his demeanor change, or did the scenarios change?
No, the scenarios stayed extremely consistent. Always, it was really a routine, methodical thing that happened every single time, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it was always baby oil leading to massages, to individual masturbation, to, you know, sexual touching, escalating to either oral and then penetrative sex. It was literally the same routine every time.
You're getting asked if the encounters were videoed.
So honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I'd never seen a video or a camera or anything. I have heard secondhand that they do, that there was a habitual behavior to record these things. But I didn't, if I was recorded, it was done without me knowing.
So, you know, we've heard the grueling testimony from Cassie as to what she went through and the injuries and health problems she sustained. So a lot of the viewers are wondering, you know, whether there were any signs, or was Diddy loving towards Cassie? Was he brutal towards her? Things like that.
Yeah, so I didn't see a lot of their interactions. I even testified to this. When they would interact, there was like a cue during the sexual sessions. This was also kind of played into my maintaining an erection and stuff, where we could be interacting, and right in the middle, he would just stand up and walk out of the room. And she would see this and get the cue, and then kind of like, we have to stop. And she would go out and she would follow him. And then they could be out 90 seconds to 15 minutes, you know, and then she'll just come back in the room and say, hey, let's pick up where we started. And now I'm supposed to just reboot, you know, and we'll pick up where we started. And then at some point he would casually come back into the room while we're in the mode. So there was a specific interaction between them, was always in a different room, out of my presence. And so I did not see any violence, any aggression. I didn't hear anything happen from the other room. It was just something I wasn't privy to.
Why do you think they left the room? Do you think they were partaking in substances and didn't want you to see that?
I can't really speculate. I thought, I always just assumed they left the room for some sort of an instruction. And now in hindsight, I do understand that. I did see somewhere where Cassie said when she was done with an escort or a guy she was dealing with, they would have their own sexual play together. So I just assumed whatever they were seeing, hey, come here, I want to kiss you, I want to touch you, I want to whatever. And I assumed they were having some sort of intimate bond based on him maybe turned on from what he saw. So that was my speculation. I have no proof, but that's how I kind of viewed it. That was there some time for them to interact.
So Vanessa wants to know, in your scenario with Cassie, whether kissing was allowed?
In my case, there was no kissing.
And Tracy wants to know, did you ever start getting feelings for Cassie?
I did not ever start to develop romantic feelings, but I did have my own feelings of feeling special, right? When I was hired, it was told to me that I've truly believed that they were a couple, and this was just a kinky type of thing that they wanted to experience. And I ended up feeling flattered, right? Because I'm thinking, I'm the only guy. This is something they're doing. One of the conversations I had with her initially after the first time was she specifically told me, hey, I'm comfortable with you. I want to call you back. This is basically interpreted as this is okay. I'm okay with this. And me being the guy chosen, I'm like, wow, man, this, especially when I found out who it was. I'm like, wow, this beautiful woman, this billionaire boyfriend, this thousands and thousands of guys. And I'm the person that they're choosing to have this fantasy. So I walked around for years, literally right up to the allegations. And this was kind of like a secret badge of honor. Like, hey, I was chosen by this beautiful woman to be her boy toy, you know? And I naively really thought I was special. So the confusion of feelings, I never once thought, Yeah, she's gonna leave her billionaire boyfriend for me. No, my ego's not that. It's not that out of control. But I did feel special that I thought I was a personal choice of hers to interact this way, and that's where the confusion of feelings might have came from in the testimony.
Did you ever confide in anyone, any of your friends, colleagues, when you found out it was Diddy?
I did. I told a handful of friends, like, man, yo, can you believe it? Like, this is what's going on. And everybody was like, no way, that's crazy. It was like I said, it was like a badge of honor. I respected their privacy. I told only a handful of people, but the people who knew was just like, wow, man, like that's just such an amazing thing. And one thing about it that I think was verifying is sometimes you tell these stories to your friends and they're like, sure, yeah, I bet. And so the few people who thought I was embellishing or exaggerating or whatever the case may be, all of this coming out in this way, it definitely was a boost to my credibility, you know?
Of course, yes. So once you knew it was Diddy, then this is what this question is getting at. How would you have handled the situation if Diddy had made a move on you? Surely it would have been scary considering his reputation. So did you have to have a scenario in your mind where you thought, if Diddy does make a move on me, how I'm going to react in that situation?
Of course, man. I always played it to the degree of just, stopping whatever interaction and just firmly explaining that, hey, look, that's not my sexual preference. I respect whatever it is, but these are my boundaries, and if you're comfortable with them, we can proceed. And if not, this has to stop. I never played it out as it being some sort of large confrontation or whatever. My experiences up to that point had always been respectful and actually literally spot on to don't acknowledge him, he won't acknowledge me, we won't have any conversations. So I didn't think it would be something overbearing, but I did play in my mind, how can I respectfully decline, without being offensive or being confrontational.
So these meetings then, were they always in the same location or did they vary?
They vary between about 5 different hotels in the New York City area.
And what was the largest tip you ever got from them?
So it wasn't necessarily a tip. I only mentioned pay one time, and that was due to striptease in the beginning, $200. And the first time, like I said, I ended up with $2,000. So I never even spoke about money again. I just showed up and took whatever they gave me, and it was always either $1,200 or $2,000. I don't know why there was a difference. I don't know why the amounts varied, but it was a consistent $1,200 to $2,000 every time.
All right. So how did the meetings wind down?
You mean how did they conclude, or you mean
yes?
So yeah, I testified to this. I was always instructed to finish, I guess, orgasm, right? But the orgasms would have to happen in a very specific way. So I was instructed to orgasm on the outside of Cassie's vagina area, like around her clit, her lips, whatever. So clearly on the outside of her. And that's how